San Francisco 49ers are once again hunting for a new defensive coordinator. Steve Wilks fired. Did he get a raw deal? And who are the names? Who can we expect to be? And what is the fit for the 49ers this time? Because they got to get that right at DC. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Excuse me, it's at Crocky209 now. He is back in the 209 on Twitter. I'll never get that right. Plus, it's still on the screen. We got to get our graphics department in to fix that one. Appreciate all the everydayers out there making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We appreciate all of you. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. So a lot of candidates on the list here for the 49ers, and we got to identify what we think they are looking for a new defensive coordinator. We got to make sure they don't mess with our timing and make that hiring right now and not an hour after our podcast like they did firing Steve Wilks with our last episode that we recorded, which clearly we saw coming. It seemed like it was something, the writing was on the wall there with Steve Wilks. Did Wilks get a raw deal to you, Eric Crocker? And by the way, thanks for color coding with me. I didn't even realize we both got the Edison high football maroon, the San Francisco Giants black. I like it.
Yeah, you know that we're just so in sync, Peacock. So if you guys aren't watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the audio, keep listening. But also come over and hang out with us on YouTube. We go live. We got people in the chat right now. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to the everydayers. But as far as Wilks, did he get a raw deal? Absolutely not. At the end of the day, it's just like any other relationship. You kind of get into the relationship, and sometimes when you move in with the person, you find out more about them, and it's like, this may not work. You're a good person, just maybe not the person for me. And I think both of us thought that it would be good if they both parted ways, right? Like if I'm Wilks, I think I want out of this situation. I don't think Kyle's looking for what I am. I think for Kyle, it was clear, and maybe the players as well, that maybe Wilks and what he was isn't a fit for the 49ers. So go and part ways, and I think that works for best. I do have I'm not a take. I got a message from a Carolina Panther player. Would you like me to read what he said about Wilks?
Yes. And is this a superstar player that's about to get franchise tagged and traded to the San Francisco 49ers by the name of Brian Burns?
Not Brian Burns, but It is another player there. And if anybody knows my background, it shouldn't be hard to guess what type of players typically follow me on social media. I won't give this player's name, but I will read the DM. And, my question to him was very simple. I'm like, man, I'm just the 49ers, for whatever reason, there seems to be a disconnect. I don't know exactly what it is. What are just your thoughts on Wilks and your time playing under Wilks? And this player had this to say, and I quote, "One of the best coaches I've ever had, best leader of men I've ever been around, and a stand-up guy, plays no favorites and holds everybody accountable. He's just a great coach. Hold on. He's just a great coach all around. And if you ask anybody who ever dealt with him, you're most likely going to get the same answer from everyone." So that was one of his players, and I hear him, but I think you might hear something slightly different from 49ers players. And maybe all these things they do like about him, but schematically and maybe just the way he goes about things, maybe not quite a fit. I asked one more person about him as well, Mike K.
And he didn't call the plays for the Panthers either, right? So that's
right.
That's two different things too. Maybe his best fit, and he wouldn't be the only guy that's ever been a better fit as a head coach than as a play caller. Or,
right.
And there's guys that are the opposite. They're amazing play callers, but as far as big picture and being a head coach, they're not great there either. So maybe that's just his skill set. Maybe being a DB's coach and assistant head coach will be his next gig. And maybe that fits him better than a play caller. And maybe even a head coach is better for him than being a defensive coordinator.
And I think these comments right here from someone who covers the Panthers, I think he kind of alluded to the same thing. He said he's one of the best leaders I've ever covered. He had a good ton of player support for the head coaching gig, just didn't get it. He felt that Tepper didn't want to be bullied into the hire. So that was kind of his take on it. But ultimately, all of that means he's a good guy. I thought he coached well this year. I think for the 49ers, again, just maybe not quite a fit, and he can go on and do good somewhere else with whatever he gets into. So much love to Wilks, but the 49ers, their search for a new defensive coordinator starts now.
Yeah, I was thinking back to, you remember in the spring when after the hiring of Steve Wilks and we were talking, and it was clear that Kyle Shanahan wanted to run the same system he's been running, wanted to bring someone in that could run that system, and we all thought it was going to be Vic Fangio, but Vic Fangio would be doing his own thing, so we thought maybe that's why he went a different direction, and Steve Wilks ended up being the answer. And then the first ever time Steve Wilks talked to reporters, he was like, he basically explained what he likes to do is different than what Kyle Shanahan's defense had been the last 7 years. He was like, okay, well, let's see. Remember, the first words out of his mouth was likes to blitz, wants to keep pressure on the opponent. He was like, well, the 49ers like to get pressure with 4, maybe run some games, but they want to have more guys in coverage and get pressure with the front 4. And I think that's where the disconnect was bringing it all together. And Kyle Shanahan talked about that. He said, there was nothing wrong with the man. Like they found the right man they wanted, but it was scheme that just in the end, it didn't quite work. And you see how the 49ers defended the run. It wasn't great, but I think he did a good job with the DBs. And Deommodore Lenoir had his best season. Travarius Ward was probably his best season as a 49er. Ambry Thomas had some moments. And so, it's when you look at the 49ers run defense and the up front, the 49ers are too good to be that bad against the run up front. And in the end, I think that was a big part of it.
Difference in philosophies and how to go about it. And, again, I always talk about how I coach, high school football, 7-on-7, all of that. And I can tell you, if you're not on the same page with the other person and you're supposed to step in and do what they want you to do and how they want to do it, but you see it differently, this really just isn't going to work. And there's always going to be kind of this tug of war battle between you, the other coaches on your staff, if you're not on the same page. So clearly Kyle Shanahan wants somebody to do something a little different in how he sees fit. And I think it would probably, and again, we'll get into the candidates, but finding someone that has specifically ran exactly how you want it, or somebody from in-house that has been a part of the other staffs that you had, that might be more beneficial to the 49ers. And then I think it'll be easier for Kyle Shanahan to put his fingerprints on that as opposed to change what a guy like Wilks has been doing for a lot of years.
So we can right away then take Bill Belichick off the list, Croc, with what you just said, because A, he's not going to run Kyle Shanahan's defense, and B, very unlikely he wants to be a defensive coordinator at this point in his career right now. Maybe that's possible, but I have a feeling when you look at some of these, big name guys that are out there, the biggest of the names, especially when you hear Pete Carroll, you hear Bill Belichick, I think you probably immediately cross those guys off the list. And not only that with Bill Belichick, but I mean, even if Bill Belichick was ready to come, you're talking about different personnel. Now you got Nick Bosa as a stand-up rusher, right, with the odd fronts. So that's something else. That's even a bigger departure than what Steve Wilks probably wanted to bring in for the 49ers if you bring in one of these coaches like Belichick or Vrabel that run an odd front.
Well, and not just that. To me, again, I feel like there has to be more than even just the X's and O's with a fit. I think personality as well. And it comes off as Shanahan is a cool dude off the field, and we've seen videos of him throwing footballs into a pizza oven, hanging out with Joe Staley. So really, he can be one of the guys. But then I think when it comes to the football side of things and the business side of things, he's a straight shooter and wants things done a specific way, whether it's with his players, and sometimes that can come off a certain way to them, or probably with his coaches as well. And I don't know if Belichick, who has been doing things a very specific way and gotten everybody to group, his big thing was a lot of times his cornerback coach, DB coach or whatever, it could be someone that played water polo. But if you can learn, he can teach you how he wants to do his things. That's why I don't want to say guys' names, but somebody that played safety for him for a decent amount of time, he told me about that. Like, He doesn't really care about your sports backgrounds or if you played the position or whatnot. Can I teach you how to do this? Can you give this information to these guys? And so he has his way of doing things and how he wants his guys to do things. Would he have to bring his own staff over? You have guys like, Bullock and Holland and these guys that have been around the 49ers for a long time. Would Belichick come in and be like, okay, you got your linebacker guy, you got your safety guy, or a DB guy? I'm cool. I got my guys I want to bring. How would that mesh with Shanahan? So I think it would be a little bit more difficult to get an established guy like Belichick or even Vrabel as well.
Next, let's get into those candidates. Let's name some names. Who are the candidates and who are maybe the best fits for the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator job? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by DoorDash. And when it comes to any watch party, and I know the Super Bowl is over, but people got watch parties for their favorite game shows, for their favorite TV shows, for their TV finales, or maybe you're just hanging with your friends, you're hanging with the boys, and maybe you just were late on time, need to get those groceries in house. You can find all that and get it all to your door with DoorDash. DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, restaurants, groceries. Maybe you just need flowers, gifts. So next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or maybe just running low on time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered with DoorDash. So get dinner for tonight, groceries for the week, or a consolation prize for your sad 49ers friends, all on DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to the DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered. Okay, Croc. I think Bill Belichick is so ridiculously unlikely. We don't have to talk about it anymore. I did a radio call, KMBR. I was talking with Tom Tolbert, and he's like, you at least make the call, right? And yeah, you do make the call. And I think Bill Belichick's right now being unemployed, he might, and he respects Kyle Shanahan, right? We think there's some mutual respect there between those guys. He might tell you straight what he thinks, and maybe that impacts your decision, and maybe that helps you going forward, or maybe you get a little part-time consultant thing going on like the 49ers had 2 years ago with Vic Fangio, and maybe get Bill Belichick around a little bit, but not necessarily make him the defensive coordinator, maybe a sounding board for Kyle Shanahan. I think that'd be fantastic.
I think a consulting role would be really good. It probably has been a very strenuous last 20 plus years for Belichick, just running an organization and maybe wanting that reset, but still wanting to be connected to football and kind of be around that. And for part of an organization that is run extremely well between Kyle and John Lynch and those guys. So why not be around the 49ers and just kind of consult and help with maybe some of your thoughts on areas they potentially can improve, which clearly you ain't won a Super Bowl yet. So there clearly are areas where you can get slightly better. Maybe it's preparation, right? Maybe it wasn't being prepared for overtime to the same extent that Kansas City was, and making a decision off of a whim as opposed to something that you carefully thought of, for a week or so and really game plan for it. So, just getting ready for the things that you maybe haven't experienced and don't know may come. I mean, think about Andy Reid. Why was he so prepared for overtime? I remember years ago when Donovan McNabb was like, I didn't even know the overtime rules. I didn't even know, So it's like, man, he went through that. And now all of a sudden, you probably prepare for it a lot more. There's probably other situations that we can't even think of, and that maybe Bill Belichick can really help a guy like Shanahan. So I kind of like that as a consultant of the 49ers. He doesn't have to be in for long hours, but he can be around and just kind of help a little bit.
Do you think Kyle Shanahan needs to, and we've talked about this before with Shanahan, does he need to release his grip a little bit? Is he gripping a little too tight? And look, you're already the head coach. You are the offensive coordinator and play caller. You have final say on the roster. Now you're going to be defensive coordinator too. Let somebody else handle the stink of defense, and you can focus more on things like game management, getting your players ready for what the overtime rules are, and some other things you need to do as head coach.
Well, actually, I think if you want to be involved in those things, then have somebody else be in charge of your offense and the game plans, right? Like, who do you trust as an offensive coordinator? And that will allow you to be more of the CEO. A lot of coaches that I've been around have been a part of the game planning for both sides of the ball, but they're not responsible for one side or the other. They oversee it. They talk about things. They're involved in the game planning, but you have your other guys that you trust to make sure that things run smoothly. So, I think for Kyle, if he does want to be more involved in defense, and if he was involved in the Super Bowl, he did an excellent job. But you also obviously, want to be involved with the offense. Maybe you have somebody that you've been grooming. Trust that person to be able to call plays and understand and see the things that, the way you do, and coach him up to the best of your ability. And maybe that will allow you to focus on or pay more attention to some of the other areas like a defense, special teams, and maybe situational football as well.
Jackson in the chat says, should Kyle give up play calling to be the defensive coordinator?
Well, you look at, and we'll probably talk about Staley. Obviously, he was the head coach for the Chargers, but he's also someone who was the defensive coordinator for the Rams. Man, he's a guy that actually started out on the offensive side of the ball. I think he played quarterback or coached offense. Then all of a sudden, kind of switched over. Bobby Slowick, I think same thing. He's a guy that was on the defensive side of the ball a lot. Now he's like an offensive guru and probably one of the next head coaches. So to think that Kyle Shanahan probably couldn't call defenses if he wanted to, I think would be kind of foolish. I think he actually really could do it. He won't do it, but I bet it's something he could do.
I bet he could. And maybe that's a good way to not lose your next offensive coordinator like Clint Kubiak is going to the Saints. Maybe get Brian Greasy ready to call plays for you, and then Kyle can go call the defense. That'd be fun. That would be really cool. But that's probably not going to happen. I think Kyle likes calling offensive plays a little bit too much for that. Here's the other thing about getting someone who's a high-profile defensive coordinator in. You don't want another one and done, and then you got to go look for another head coach again if that guy, or another defensive coordinator again, if that guy goes and gets a head coaching job. So whether it's Belichick, whether it's Mike Vrabel, scheme fit, I don't know, personality-wise, if they're going to allow Kyle to tell them anything about how they run their defense, and then they probably want a head coach job anyway, and then you're going to lose them. You have to find another defense coordinator anyway. So I just don't like the fit for a lot of the big name guys I see out there, and I know it's a little bit more difficult knowing who the great assistants are that could be a defense coordinator. But talking Belichick, Pete Carroll's not coming to San Francisco to be defense coordinator for the 49ers. Mike Vrabel, those would be complete shockers. So I think we can take them off the list.
The homie Guy Haberman had brought up Rex Ryan, and Rex Ryan was interested in the Cowboys job, and his whole thing was, "But I'm good with TV, but if the right situation pops up, I may be interested." And Rex is very interesting, definitely intriguing. He's somebody that I had the opportunity to be around. He is hands down the best coach I've ever had the pleasure of being coached by. Just the way that he is everything all in one, which is very rare to find a head coach that is all those things, whether it's a player's coach, X's and O's coach, master motivator, and amazing teacher with the way he goes about things. You don't usually see that with coaches, but he also is very confident in his scheme and how he does things. He's a branch of his dad, Buddy Ryan, who was a tremendous defensive coordinator and the innovator of certain defenses. And, he learned from him. And obviously, he has his brother, Rob. So I don't know how that would mesh. Again, I don't know if it's a one-off thing with Kyle, kind of demanding things to be a certain way, or if it's been that way. But if you are bringing in some of those kind of guys, I would say that it would be a little bit more difficult to do that.
There's one more former head coach that's available to be a defense coordinator right now. And Kyle would have some really good insight into Brandon Staley, who was a former DC with the Los Angeles Rams. We talked about how Vic Fangio was a consultant with the 49ers for the 2022 season. Joe Staley came up under Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator. So I think Brandon Staley, there's been some reports that he might be a name the 49ers are looking at. Brandon Staley could be a guy that, while he did run an odd front, I think he could be someone who's been a successful defensive coordinator, has enough ties to Kyle Shanahan. If you're looking for someone from the outside to bring in, he's a smart guy. He failed as a head coach, obviously, but he was good as a coordinator. And there's probably enough mutual praise and mutual respect from other coaches that Kyle would talk to about him. And he's also someone I think that Kyle would be able to say, hey, we're not going to run the odd front. We're going to run an even front, but go to work. Brandon Staley, I think he might be the leader in the clubhouse, Croc. What do you think?
The interesting thing with Staley, he was kind of one and done as a coordinator. He was the coordinator 1 year with the Rams. The next thing you know, he's a head coach for the Chargers. I do feel like he's someone that probably could fit a little bit more, probably understands the vibes of a Kyle Shanahan type. You got McVay. I think McVay, slightly different, but kind of same vibes a little bit with how they kind of run things. Maybe a little more loose. That's what it feels like. But when you look at Staley and potentially his fit, I think he was a guy that really first adopted that quarters, predominantly kind of a quarters defense and what that looked like. And, you continue to kind of build on that. If you're the 49ers, I know the 49ers have been doing a lot of that as well. It seems like a good fit, but I'd have to know exactly how he wants to do things with the front, the linebackers. How much do you put on them? How much do you put in coverage? I saw someone in the chat earlier say, man, it felt like Wilks put a lot on the linebackers. I think they didn't have any more on them this year than they did in the past, especially when they ran a lot of that cover 3. They had to carry guys, number 3 in the slot vertically across the field all the way down. There were times where we saw Malcolm Smith running vertically 45 yards down the field with guys like Tyler Lockett. So, I think it's the same. You put a lot of responsibility on them in coverage, and that's why you have guys that played a lot of defensive back in college as well. But I think Staley is probably a guy that is realistic and may be able to fit a little bit more than some of the older guys, and also may not be looking to become a head coach anytime soon again, as opposed to Vrabel and Belichick. The next coaching cycle, their names are going to be brought up a ton. Mm-hmm. Staley, you might be able to have a coordinator that you keep around for a few years.
And Mateo says, can't imagine Joey will talk up Staley to his brother Nick. And by the way, future 49er Joey Bosa, too, in my opinion. We'll talk more about some of these offseason things. And starting on Monday, big team needs episode, mock draft Mondays. Oh, it's offseason time for the San Francisco 49ers. Once we figure out what this coaching staff is going to look like. More of the candidates, some in-house candidates as well, next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect for city drivers and great escapes alike. Class exclusive Google built in. We're talking about a 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system with Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. It is automatic. And how about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder? Has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. We're talking 284 horsepower with the Nissan Pathfinder and 6,000 pounds of towing. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, and the new 2024 Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com.
Hey, Peacock, before we get into some more of the candidates, our guy Cal Bear 949, he has a good one here. Is it this one? Oh, right, here we go. Big City Man. He says, I think one big coaching fail was 4th and 1. You are not prepared for the QB keep. Got to tell Bosa situationally to crash on Mahomes. Everyone else goes first. Pacheco. And just from being in meetings, I would say it's a lot easier when you see that on TV as opposed to being down there on the field. And the reasoning why is when you are in meetings, a lot of times you'll go back 3 games. Sometimes you have more time like they did. You might go back 5 games, 6 games, 7 games. There was not one time this entire year that Mahomes kept on that. So it's hard to say, hey, be prepared for something that they haven't done all season long. You're running 60 to 70 plays a game for 19, 20 games or whatever it is. And not one time did Mahomes keep. But hey, on 4th and 1 right here, you might. So I think Bosa, he was doing probably what he had seen on film. Oh, shotgun. They're going to try to run away. I'm going to crash down and try to make a tackle from the backside on this. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But I don't know if I can put that on any lack of preparation because, it's not like they had Justin Fields back there where he's potentially going to keep it. Yeah,
it's so hard when you have a quarterback that can do that and just pull it down and get you some yards. And yeah, you're right. It's 4th and 1. If everyone's not going hard after the running back too, then it's just an easy get for him as well. So you got to be prepared, obviously, for those situations. It's a tough one. Don't let him be in 4th and 1 in overtime, right? How about Marquand Manuel Croc? I'm going to reference Matt Barrow's article here for The Athletic, and you can get more detail from his article about some of these head coach candidates. A lot we've already talked about here, but there's a few interesting ones from outside the organization that have been around. And Marquand Manuel was a former safety in the NFL. He's the safeties coach for the Jets. He was with the Atlanta Falcons in 2017 and 2018, and he ran the Atlanta Falcons defense, from 2017 to 2018. Before that, he was an assistant with Kyle Shanahan at the same time with the Atlanta Falcons. So has some background with Kyle Shanahan, and he does come from the Pete Carroll defense with Robert Saleh. And, so he's kind of gone through the cover 3. Then we're going to do more of now what Robert Saleh does. So there's a lot of connections there with Marquand Manuel, which is an interesting name, I think, from outside the organization. Still, another one from outside the organization who's been with the 49ers in the past is Cory Undlin. He's the Texans defensive passing game coordinator. I'd probably put him right now at number 2 as the most likely to be the 49ers defensive coordinator after Brandon Staley. And obviously Undlin was with the 49ers in 21 and 22, and then left with DeMeco Ryans to go be defensive passing game coordinator with the Houston Texans. So he's an interesting name to keep an eye on for the 49ers as well, just because of those ties. And he's still running similar systems to what the 49ers do under DeMeco in Houston. Richard Smith, Indianapolis Colts linebackers coach. And he's an older guy, 68 years old, been around a long time. Dolphins, Texans, Falcons, overlapped a couple of times with Kyle Shanahan earlier with the Texans and then with the Falcons again. So Richard Smith has some overlap, but if you're going to go with an older coach who's a linebacker coach, Croc, why not just stay in-house? Maybe the guy who should have got the job anyway. I know there were some health problems that maybe added to the idea that Johnny Holland, 49ers current linebacker coach, why he wouldn't have gotten the job last year, but now he's a couple years removed from the myeloma, I believe is what it was here, according to Matt Barrow's article, some health conditions that Johnny Holland had, but maybe he's the guy in-house.
I like the thought of somebody in-house, and there's going to be a couple candidates between Holland. You got Bullocks, who's been, the safeties coach 7 years now. He's been with the 49ers for a while. I love the thought of someone that's been in-house. That was our thing last offseason, and it was really somewhat of a shock that they went and got Steve Wilks. You look at in-house and what the 49ers have done so far to this point. Right away, you got Robert Saleh. Not in-house, but that was the first kind of domino that you identified. He runs something how I like it. Wasn't the first option, but you end up bringing him in. With him, you got DeMeco Ryans as well, and Holland, and all the other guys, right? So, okay, let's teach Robert Saleh, and everybody else that we've mentioned has been in all of those meetings with Saleh on how they want a defense to go. He goes away. DeMeco Ryans, next man up. He's been there the whole time. Truly understands it, was a part of every single meeting with Robert Saleh. Boom, he goes away. Well, let's maybe stick with someone else in-house that has been a part of the game planning and truly understand and knows Kyle Shanahan. I talk about, the relationship thing, right? And with me and I'll never divorce my wife, right? Because she knows me. I don't have to, teach someone, how I am, the things that I like, how I like things done, when I get home, what that looks like. And when you're somebody like Holland and Bullock, you have been around Kyle Shanahan and truly understand that. So even when the rest of the world doesn't quite understand Kyle Shanahan, the Eric Crockers of the world, you understand him. And that's what matters most. And I think that would be a better marriage between not just Kyle Shanahan, but with the players as well.
Kris Kocurek's obviously a big name in-house. I think Kyle Shanahan was asked about that. And this was his quote from Wednesday. He says, "I know what Kris majors in. I know what he loves to do. His passion is D-line. He doesn't go outside of that a lot, but Kris is a hell of a coach and he's capable of doing a lot." So it doesn't sound like Kris Kocurek's probably going to be the guy there. But clearly Kris Kocurek's a guy that Kyle Shanahan wants around, which is another big thing. Kyle Shanahan wants to keep a lot of his assistants who are around and probably wants to keep that wide 9 front that Kris Kocurek is running there on the defensive line. Here's a dark
I
horse.
think that was a big thing, real quick. That even like going back to last year, when that coaching hire cycle started for the defensive coordinator, Kocurek's name was brought up, and a lot of what I've seen was people immediately kind of shooting it down, saying he kind of likes being a defensive line coach. And unless you kind of really been in those shoes and everything that goes into, game planning, install, being responsible for all these players, it's hard to understand like how someone could be like, I don't want to be a coordinator. Yes, it's more money, but it's also more problems. Let me stay at this position. I do this well. I interact with these guys, and I don't want to take away from what I am with these guys on a daily basis. So I could see how a guy like Kocurek might just want to stay as a defensive line coach.
A couple more names that aren't being thrown out a lot, but are dark horses for the 49ers. Another one from the Texans staff, linebackers coach Kris Kiffin, who did spend a couple of years with the 49ers, and he was one of the guys that was really pounding the table for Aziz Al-Shaair, who he coached in college, which was a great call, by the way. And, D'Amico Ryans was a linebackers coach. Robert Saleh was a linebackers coach. Now Kris Kiffin was with the 49ers, and now he's D'Amico Ryans linebackers coach. So there's an interesting name there. And then Nick Sorensen is the 49ers defensive passing game and nickel back coach. And he's very highly thought of apparently in the building. And Barrows brings him up here. And I heard Greg Papa talking about him and the way he runs some practices and what he does with the ball. There's this ball drill or something that he does that is a big deal. So Nick Sorensen's another interesting name for the 49ers. And the last thing I have written on the background for those of you watching our rundown here on YouTube, the lab. I think it's so important. I think that's what has made Kyle Shanahan such a good offensive mind and offensive coordinator, and why his assistants are in such high demand. It's when they get in the lab and how they figure out what works and what to do. And Steve Wilks wasn't a part of that. He didn't get to spend time in the lab like Robert Saleh did, because the defense that Robert Saleh left from the 49ers wasn't the same defense they started with when he was brought in 2017. And D'Amico Ryans was around for all of that. He was in the lab for all of that. And so the guy they bring in, I think, is someone that had to be in the lab, someone that's been around, understands the why they're doing all exactly the things that they're doing, how they got to where they are, that knows the personnel. And it goes right along with what you were just saying, Croc. That's why I think in-house, or someone who's been in-house and is still in New York or in Houston running similar schemes, that's where my money is for the new DC.
Did Sorensen play in the NFL? Why does that name sound familiar?
Yeah, former NFL player, safety.
Gotcha. Okay, yep. I remember. Early 2000s.
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. Nick Sorensen. So those are the names. Those are the candidates as we know them today. Hopefully,
anyone you like most?
I'm not as down on Staley as a lot of people are, but
they're down on the head coach Staley. I don't know if they're down on defensive coordinator Staley.
Yeah. Right.
But if you watch, as a head coach, he just at times it felt incompetent. But as a coordinator, he might just be better suited to be that.
And his defenses didn't play well either. That's the scary thing. But and as the listener brought up in the chat, maybe Joey Bosa's like, oh, this dude's great. He just, this and this went bad, but he's awesome with X's and O's, and he's super smart. And maybe that would be the scouting report on him. And
was he the DC? Was it for Chargers?
Yeah, he called defensive plays too.
Okay, that's terrible then. Yeah. And he had the guys like, it's like you want to go, oh, well, they didn't quite act. No, they had some ballers. He just might not be good.
He got that job for a reason. He won a Super Bowl with the Rams.
Yeah, but you don't know if, okay, as a defensive guy, sometimes Robert Saleh, the first thing he did was hand the defense off to Jeff Ulbrich and was like, all right, Ulbrich, you call plays. I'll kind of oversee everything. And that's fine as well. But, when things don't go right, it kind of falls on your shoulders. But with Staley, he was also coaching the defense, and he had some guys, a lot of injuries. I will give them that. They have dealt with maybe some of the worst injury luck every year. Like this year, the 49ers were relatively healthy. You lost Hufanga, and that was a hit. But for the most part, you were pretty good. 2020, they were really hit right when you lost Bosa and everybody else. But for the most part, it's kind of one outlier year where you lost everybody. It feels like the Chargers lose Bosa and Derwin James every year for an extended period of time. And like those are the guys supposed to carry a defense.
You know who I'm interviewing is whoever Steve Spagnuolo with the Kansas City Chiefs #2 is on his defensive staff is who I'm interviewing. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a piece of what's going on over there, because they're playing ridiculously good football, and you would learn a lot about how they think about defending you. So you would learn a lot about yourself at the same time. So, and look, how awesome have their defensive backs played with the Chiefs? We're talking about Charvarius Ward was what, a 7th rounder, or was he undrafted? And
undrafted free agent to the Dallas Cowboys, was let go from Dallas and picked up from Kansas City and turned into a really good corner for them.
Yeah, L'Jarius Sneed was a 4th round pick, and he became a shutdown guy. He's about to cash in this offseason. They've done a really good job coaching up those guys on the defensive side of the ball, creating pressure, covering, running around, hitting guys. So I might.
Linking on a nickel's name right now.
McDuffie.
But
Second
out of Washington, he was an outside guy. But they saw fit, hey, man, he has some of the stuff. We can put this guy inside, and he ended up being an all-pro in the nickel. So being able to identify guys that truly fit at a high level to where you're able to do more things with them and be more versatile, I think that's something maybe the 49ers can kind of dive into as well. They got a guy, man. Issues, man. You can look at Deommodore Lenoir, and he's got some of that too. If he was in the all-pro talk for how he played in nickel, I would not have been surprised.
Kyle's not going to go to the Chiefs, though, right?
Can somebody come? We beat you, so you got to listen to me on how I do things. Kind of like, go ahead, stay over there.
He would have that too. Like anytime something comes up, he's like, well, hold on, and he would have his rings on his finger. Let me think about that, Kyle.
Did you hear what Kelsey was saying to Charvarius Ward while he was blocking him?
No.
Oh, do you like it over there, huh? You like it over there? He was blocking him pretty good too. He was like, yeah, you like it over there? I'm like, whew. It hurts more because you lost to him. Like you win and he says that, it's like, we won. You lose, it's like, damn, I can't say anything. I'm just gonna act like I didn't see that clip.
All right. We got to go. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. Thanks to everyone who's jumping in on the live with us on this Thursday night. And if not, enjoy us on your Friday morning drive to work, as a lot of folks do here. Appreciate all the everydayers. Make sure you are subscribed on the Locked On Podcast Network, YouTube, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Your team every day. Croc and I back Monday, off-season mode, team needs. We're looking at draft. We're looking at free agency, and we're probably looking at a new defensive coordinator as well. Talk to you then right here, Locked On 49ers.